Hello, and welcome to the Strength Catalyst, the podcast where, with each episode, we explore what it truly looks like to lead with clarity, intention, and the wise use of our strengths. I'm your host, Colleen. I'm an executive coach and a strength strategist, and these conversations are designed to help all of us become a little more grounded, a little more self-aware, and a lot more intentional in the way we lead. So one of the stats that I find particularly motivating is this. Employees who feel their manager helps them use their strengths are 23% more likely to be thriving at work. Can you imagine if your team members were thriving that much more in the important roles they serve for your organization? That would be incredible. And that matters for all leaders, but it matters especially for leaders who oversee highly creative people. Today's guest, Sharon Polli, leads exactly that kind of environment. She's the executive director of the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, Massachusetts. This extraordinary institution has shaped the creative lives of more than 1,000 artists and writers over nearly 6 decades. And what struck me when reflecting on this episode is how Sharon leads with a rare blend of mission-driven purpose, strategic awareness, deep listening, and humility. In our conversation, she opens up about something many leaders struggle with, but rarely articulate, and that's the challenge of context shifting, moving from a budget review to brand feedback to staff coaching, all within the same hour, while being present, thoughtful, and of course, practical. So we explore how she uses her strengths to manage those shifts, how she anchors herself in authenticity, even when the pace is relentless. We also talk about what creative organizations need from leaders today and why self-knowledge is not a luxury, it's an essential ingredient for sustainable leadership. It's really a thoughtful, honest conversation about leadership in a creative world. So let's begin. Well, hello, Sharon, and welcome to the Strength Catalyst podcast. I told you a good friend of mine attended a very empowering Fine Arts Work Center summer program this past summer, and she had a fabulous experience with you and your team there, and that led her to suggest to me that I approached you to be a guest on this podcast. So thank you for saying yes. I'm so excited. I'm really eager to get to know you better in this conversation and learn for myself and for our listeners more about the Fine Arts Work Center. And I really want to help you consider how you are maximizing your strengths. So to get us started, I'm eager for you to tell our listeners about your role and share the Fine Arts Work Center mission. So can you tell us a little bit about what you do and why you do it?
Well, thank you for that very warm introduction, Colleen. And please, please, please extend a big thank you from me to your friend who had such a good experience and suggested me for this podcast. I'm really honored and excited to participate. As you shared, I run an organization here on Outer Cape Cod in Provincetown called the Fine Arts Work Center. And our mission here is to nurture artists and writers and support creative connections. And the way that we do that is through a number of really enriching and rewarding programs, including our signature initiative is a fellowship for emerging artists and writers who are selected from over 1,500 applications nationally. We invite 10 visual artists and 10 writers to come be in residence with us for 7 months from October through April to focus on artistic practice and develop new work. That program has been around for nearly 60 years and nurtured over 1,000 fellows who have gone on to shape global culture in really meaningful and profound ways, including by winning the Nobel Prize for Literature, becoming the U.S. Poet Laureate, showing at major museums and institutions all around the world, from the Metropolitan Museum of Art to the Venice Biennale. And then the program that your friend participated in is a wonderful summer education program for adults to take creative workshops in poetry, printmaking, fiction, sculpture, photography. All summer long, we throw our doors open really wide to students and faculty from all over the world who can come to this creative ecosystem that is Provincetown and engage with other really serious artists and writers to develop their craft. So it's a pretty special place here out in Provincetown with lots of opportunities for the public to come and get engaged and discover their own creative voice.
That beautiful smile that I can see in our conversation today seems like a great demonstration of how much you love the organization. So before we start talking about your strengths, I'm curious to know, like, what do you see as maybe the superpower strength that makes the Fine Arts Work Center such a special organization?
What a fun question to ask. We talk a lot here about our secret sauce being this really unique combination of solitude and community. And so when we think about our programs, we offer this beautiful balance of time and space and a sense of creative freedom and possibility for artists and writers to focus on what they want to say, how they want to build their skills, what work they want to create. And we do this all in the context of Provincetown and the beautiful natural ecology of Outer Cape Cod, where there is such a vibrant creative community of people who are really curious, really interested in learning, really interested in artistic practice. And so I think our secret sauce is really that balance of solitude and community here.
All right. Well, so building on what you just said there about people being curious and eager to learn, I know you wouldn't have agreed to be on this podcast if you weren't eager to learn about your own strengths. So let's shift this and start talking about you. And to set the stage, I want to ground our conversation in the fact that self-awareness doesn't happen automatically. It grows through, like we're going to have today, real intentional reflection, and then coming up with small daily habits, behaviors that enable you and others to be really strategic in our strength use. So our goal today is to really help you deepen your self-awareness and create some strategies, practical strategies, hopefully, that you can use to become even more wise as a leader. And then hopefully our listeners are going to gain some insights and motivation to have that same intentional reflection on how they use their strengths. And I will also say, just a sort of stage set here, is that the reason we want to use our strengths are many. And the research tells us that when we use our strengths regularly, we can have enhanced well-being and life satisfaction. We have lower psychological stress and less likely to have depressive symptoms. We have, of course, increased productivity. We are 6 times more engaged in our work when we're using our strengths. So if we think about you as a manager and leader, just think about that. When you are managing people, the likelihood of them being 6 times more engaged in their work is so much greater when you are really sensitive about what their strengths are and how they can use them more effectively. So you took a strengths profile assessment and you've got a report in front of you, and that's handy because it'll enable you to deepen your self-awareness and have this conversation with me. And one of the types of strengths that we all have are realized strengths. And those are the strengths that we perform well, that we get energy from. And of course, it's not really a strength if we don't get a chance to use it. And I often think of my realized strengths as kind of my superpowers. So there are plenty of strengths that I'm not good at. I'm really not good at being competitive. When my family is like, our extended family is gathering to play cards, I don't usually partake because I care more about the relationship deepening and the chatter, than I do about winning. And so I'm really not probably very much fun to play with if you're serious. I try to tell
that explains
jokes.
why I don't love family board game night. My competitiveness was also low on this profile. So
yes.
I share that with you.
Yeah. All right. So on that, all right, just a side note. One of the ways that we can be participants when we need to use one of our weaknesses, whether that's in a social situation like you and I are just talking about, playing games, or whether that's in some sort of a work scenario, is to think about, well, what's a strength that I could use alongside that competitive strength, for example, that keeps me bonding with the family during family board night or card game night, in my extended family, and makes me want to sit there and be part of it. So I take a look at my realized strengths, the ones that feel like they're sort of my superpowers, and well, how can I lend that to the situation to make me really want to be there? And among my superpower strengths are, probably no surprise, I'm doing this podcast, esteem building and enabling. I love talking to people like you and really helping you think about, well, what are the strengths that really enable me to be the best version of myself? And I love helping people think about, well, how could you build your confidence to use those even more? And what would it look like if you were using them even more? Question I want to ask you, and that is, as you think about your most predominant strengths, what feel like are some of your superpowers that you're bringing to your role as the executive director there?
Hi, I'm Shannon, Colleen's daughter and her business partner in developing a tool that inspires self-reflection, introspective strength cards. These are a set of 60 beautifully designed cards, each with an inspiring quote and a simple call to action to help you pause, reflect, and be more intentional in how you use your strengths each day. The idea is simple. Pull a card, read and reflect on the message, and use it to spark a fresh perspective. It's an easy, practical way to build confidence, deepen self-awareness, and bring your best self forward, one strength at a time. You can check them out and order your own deck at introspectivecards.com. Whether you use them personally, gift them to a friend, or bring them into your workplace, they're designed to help you reconnect with what energizes you. Again, that's introspectivecards.com, your daily companions on a journey to authenticity and happiness.
Well, it was really, really interesting to take a look at this strength profile, and what a huge gift to have the chance to reflect in this time with you about this. We're all moving so fast all the time. These moments to pause and sit down and really think together are rare and precious. In looking at the strengths that popped out for me on this strength profile, I observed two things. The first, I observed that many of the strengths fall in what I might call that mission category, that category of really wanting to feel fulfilled by what it is that the work is doing in the world. What is the impact that you're making in the world? A lot of things bubbled up like mission, service to others, and legacy from the various strength categories that all aligned really beautifully with leading a nonprofit organization at this time of so much need and change. The other thing that popped out at me was there was an interesting set of skills that were a balance of incubating new ideas and thinking really strategically about the future and what type of action you want to take, with a set of skills around planning and organizing. And so I had to laugh. I felt a little relieved. Sometimes I worry that I can fall too much on the side of the big ideas and wanting to take on and tackle new things. And I always want to make sure that I have the organization and the planning to back them up, particularly when we're dealing with an arts organization that has a lot of creative people around who can get swept away by the big idea, but has limited resources and might really need to think carefully about how you're implementing any new project or new vision that you might have. Because in an arts organization, there's plenty of vision to go around. It's really about how you can put things into practice that is going to make an organization thrive.
Okay, excellent. So tell me, give me an example of a time when you felt that some of these superpower strengths that you just described, or all of them, enabled you to be the best version of yourself, the most confident, best version of yourself in your role.
Yeah, I think that right when I first arrived, the organization was going through a bit of an existential moment of self-reflection and a desire to do really its first ever strategic planning process. we were asking a lot of questions amongst the staff and the board of trustees and participants. What do artists and writers need now? And is what the Fine Arts Work Center been focused on over the past nearly 5 decades still relevant to working artists and writers today? And so one of the very first things that I did as a newly appointed executive director in 2021 was work with the board and work with a wonderful strategic planning team to have a series of listening conversations and to ask our community, students, faculty, past fellows, community members, what role they might see the Fine Arts Work Center playing as it enters its next chapter. And so that process of really deep conversation, deep engagement, and deep listening gave me an opportunity to use some of those strengths that we just talked about, that kind of, incubation, really thinking deeply, strategic awareness, to plan our path forward over the next several years. And it's been very gratifying to put some tangible ideas in place for what we might do more deeply, what we might shift and do a little bit differently through that strategic plan, and then spend several years bringing it to life. The summer workshop program that your friend participated in, as I shared at the top, is, a wonderful program that welcomes hundreds of students from all over the country. Through those initial listening sessions, we heard from a lot of people how we might shift that program to even more deeply engage them. We were able to launch a new scholarship initiative that would allow us to welcome more than 120 students who might not be able to participate in that workshop without scholarship support, without travel support, without housing support, and really open it up to be a more vibrant and inclusive program. And all of that came from really strategically thinking about what the good is that we want to see in the world through the work that we're doing every day, and how we might plan and organize in order to bring it to life.
Wow. It sounds like you have a really strong set of thinking strengths, that when you use those in combination, I presume you probably get in the zone. That's what happens sometimes when we use several of our strengths together in combination. We get into that zone where we almost lose track of time because we're getting so fulfilled from, or you're getting so fulfilled from the mission approach that you have. And then when you're putting the plans together, you're using your planning strength, you're getting things organized, and you're thinking about the big picture, the strategic thinking, and what kind of legacy am I going to leave? And it's like Sharon is way down deep, really
It's
focused.
the flow state.
Yeah.
You've just described the flow state.
So tell me then, what might be next as a goal for you as you think about how you want to be evolving and showing up as the best version of yourself as a leader? What could we talk about that would help you think about ways to use your strengths in new goals and initiatives you might have?
One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is how challenging it can be to be an executive director and tasked with being able to quickly and really thoughtfully and carefully respond to a lot of different content areas. So on any given day, I might be trying to give the marketing team feedback on a new brand development, and then pivoting really quickly to reconciling a multi-million-dollar budget, to then going out to an event and trying to inspire people that I meet one-on-one to get more involved with the organization. So this kind of constant movement between various skill sets can be taxing and can be a little challenging. And one of the things as a leader I want to make sure that I'm always bringing is presence, focus, kind of showing up to all of our different stakeholders, whether they be staff or participants or board members, as my best self, and being able to quickly get into whatever that task is or that question is, and give thoughtful, concrete, substantive feedback and response. So that's something I would love to talk to you about, those learned skills that show up on this Strength Finder report that are vital to the job of the executive director. How do you kind of stay energized and motivated while doing a series of skills that might feel taxing? And then the second thing I'd love to talk a little bit about is how we can use this strength-based approach that you're using in these conversations and in your executive coaching to be better managers ourselves. So how might I bring some of this learning today to develop my team and to make sure that they can also access some of this job satisfaction, all of those benefits you named off at the top of the call?
Okay, so thinking first about your need to be adaptable and to context shift, and recognizing that that sometimes can be, even though you're good at it, it can be draining. The best way, from a strengths perspective, that we can be stronger and more motivated in our areas of draining strengths, like adapting or context shifting, there's sort of two strategies that you can employ. The first is to ask yourself, is there someone else, let's say on your team, that is truly energized by the adapting and the context shifting and being a change agent and getting people catalyzed when there's a little bit of chaos around? And can that person or those people do this with me or do it for me, with the expectation that that would be a gift to them and give them a chance to use their strengths. And it would take a little bit of the pressure off of you and, of course, enable you to be as versatile in your strength use, whether those using your own strengths or whether those are using the strengths of the people who are on your team. So that's the first question that you can reflect on. I'll give you both, and then we can come back and kind of talk to the practicality of this. Secondly, if that is not an option, you're looking at your team, your extended colleagues, and you're saying, this really has to fall on me. And for whatever reason, I can't tap into my team members for this. Then the question to ask yourself is, all right, well, as I think about all the strengths that do give me energy that I have, some of which you've already mentioned today, how could I use those in service of my goal of being more effective and energized when I have to do this adapting and context shifting? Because after all, the greatest tools in your toolkit, the areas where you're going to grow the fastest, where you're going to feel most creative, where you're going to feel most authentic and confident, are when you are using those particular most energizing strengths. So would you want to explore either one of those two avenues right now?
Yeah, let's definitely talk about both. When you think about that context, I love that phrase, context shifting. Which of the strengths on this profile are the ones that support that are the ones that I might be looking for in other people? Is it adaptability?
Well, I think you could probably tell me better than I can tell you. And so let's take our eye off the strength list for a minute and talk to me about the situation that you're in, the situation that you find yourself in, and where you need to do this context shifting. What do you think you need in order to be most effective? Because you're in those situations and I'm not. Tell me about them.
Yeah, what I was thinking about as you were chatting was thinking about how I could better articulate to the team the way I need challenges or information shared with me in order to be able to digest it in the way that's most useful. And so, one of the things that I think I find challenging is kind of quickly entering into a conversation and being able to understand the problem that we're trying to address, having enough information in order to make a sound and quick judgment call, and being able to ask the right questions that actually add value to whoever it is that I'm meeting with or talking to keep the ball moving forward. And so as you were chatting, I was thinking, well, maybe it's less about me becoming a superwoman who can easily and quickly and fastly understand every issue that gets presented, and more about coaching my colleagues or trustees or others to frame something at the top of a conversation in a succinct and substantive way, to make a recommendation or to present a couple of options, and then to have the chance to kind of dig in with them. I think what I might find challenging is trying to enter in the middle of something without that kind of clear formulation at the top. And so maybe I need to be more honest about the pace and the time that I have to dedicate to things, and invite people who are presenting me with issues for approval or with questions for feedback, turning it back on them a little bit to say, like, how can you help support me to arrive at the right conclusion with you? And how can you bring more recommendations to me to make that quick judgment call on?
Brilliant. So in that way that you just potentially came up with an aha of how, a practical way you can move forward with this, which of your strengths would you be using to execute it in that way?
Well, I think the first thing is one of the strengths that I have is this interesting one that I love called authenticity. So whatever you do it with genuine conviction and without pretense. You're always keeping to your own values and beliefs. So that kind of authenticity of being very honest and direct to say, I need support here might be a strength. And then there's a strength that I have that is the humility. I'm a humble person, preferring to give other people credit for success rather than taking the credit myself. So I think there's something nice about saying, like, hey, authentically, we have this issue. I need your partnership and collaboration. You're the person who ultimately is leading this effort and going to be moving this project forward. So I want to hear your recommendation. I want to hear your feedback. I'm a sounding board and a partner, but I don't need to be the decider on everything. So maybe a combination of those two strengths of being honest about what I need and authentic to that, combined with a desire to partner and to share credit for successes, could be a way to approach these conversations with various folks.
All right. I want you to come up with one or two more. So you've talked about how you can use your authenticity. You've talked about how you can use your humility. The chances of you feeling extra motivated and extra engaged in this endeavor are going to be greater when we pile a couple more strengths into the way you're going to approach it. So what other strengths could you be using as you prepare for or execute what you're describing to me?
Well, of the strengths listed on this strength assessment, the ones that I get most excited about from a work point of view are that kind of strategic awareness and incubation. I love thinking about things, being strategic, trying to find the best solution. And I think I can only do that when I'm given the framing and the data to live in that space. And so making sure that when issues come up, we're starting from a place of having a full assessment of what that challenge is will enable me to be more strategic, to be more thoughtful about responding to it, rather than feeling maybe defensive or reactive. Really be able to move into a space of strategic thinking because the full picture is presented and because that advanced preparation has been done.
One of the reasons, Sharon, that I love being a strength coach is because often all I need to do is help the person, as you just did there, articulate what the question is, think for themselves about what the potential solutions are, think about what strengths you have, and then usually the person solves it for themselves because you can see your way forward often when someone helps you look really deeply at your tools and how can they be useful. And I always say my goal as a coach is to work myself out of the job, because if I am effective at helping someone deepen their self-awareness, then they can self-coach because they know what their strengths are. They know limitations of their strengths. They know perhaps what they don't have that they need to find from someone else. And they know what happens perhaps when they overplay a strength, and then they can be that much more introspective and successful in solving the challenges, that undoubtedly come along on a really regular basis, particularly when you're running an organization like yours. Anything else on this topic you want to talk about before we pivot to the managing question?
My wheels are turning about how to kind of put this into practice quickly.
Yay. Awesome. That's exactly what happens, right? Because all of a sudden, let's pivot to your second topic about managing people, because a thought just came to my mind, and that is, I have quite a few clients who have taken this strengths approach to the way that they manage their teams. And they have a practice where when a team member comes in and is searching for help or expressing a frustration and not sure where to go, what to do, the practice is to say to that person, well, what's one of your strengths that you could use to do the blank, blank, blank thing? And the person hopefully stops for a moment and says, well, I like to be very planful. So I guess if I came up with a plan, that's probably a good place for me to start. And then the manager would say, well, what's another one of your strengths that you can use? And they, pause for a moment and they think about it. And maybe they need to be prompted and they say, well, I really like to get some feedback. Well, what would it look like for you to get that feedback? Well, I would do this and this and this. But usually by the time a manager has got to the asking for a third strength or a fourth strength, the person is out the door, ready to go, because all of a sudden they see their way forward, right, through their strengths. And I could make suggestions to you from my experience or my other clients' experiences, or you could do the same with the people who report to you. And that could be helpful, but it's not, in my experience, it's not as helpful as helping someone see the possibility and the potential and sometimes the limitations in the strengths that they have.
I'm jotting down what's a strength that you could use to help address that. What would it look like for you to do that? What's another strength you might use? I love the idea of just having those up next to my desk to remind myself. It can be very simple. It doesn't have to be solving each problem on its own, but guiding and coaching colleagues and team members to do exactly this process that you and I are doing together today.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Often when I'm coaching someone, as I did with you today, I try to get you to come up with 4 strengths you're going to use, because then we increase the likelihood. So when you make your little cheat sheet there of things you're going to do, perhaps you strive for trying to help the person come up with 4 strengths that they could use. Now, sometimes it's hard for people to articulate their strengths. As a matter of fact, the science tells us that fewer than 2 in 10 people actually use their strengths every day at work, and most people can only name 1 or 2. Now, if you stay with them a little longer, they'll probably be able to do that. But off the top of their head, people often are hesitant or unsure what their strengths are. So in order to help yourself along as a manager and try to bring the strengths-based approach into your management style, a couple of thoughts that I can share with you. The first is you have in front of you a list of 60 strengths with their definitions. One of the things you might do is either use that list yourself to spot the strengths in the people with whom you work. You could even ask them in your meetings with them, tell me about something that you've done this week, this month, this year, or maybe some of my clients will do this every month. They have the person that reports to them pause and talk about something that they've done particularly satisfyingly and successfully that month, and what strengths did they use. And that enables you and them to begin to kind of create their own little dictionary of what their most unique, most energizing, perhaps hopefully most powerful superpower strengths are that they might have. Or you could even give them that list or any list of strengths and say, take a look at this list and why don't you come back to me and talk to me about the 5 or the 10 or whatever quantity you feel you're able to use most frequently in your work, or the ones you aren't able to use but you get a lot of energy from, that we can think about for the next calendar year or next quarter. How can we bring some more of these strengths in? And I also mentioned to you before we started this podcast interview, so let me give you some more details now, the strengths profile assessment that you took, there is a free version. So they offer, the vendor, they come out of the UK, really smart people, which is why I like to use their tool in my work. They have a 20-minute online assessment, as you know, and it's a set of pretty simple questions that get at trying to understand which strengths you feel you perform well, which strengths you feel you get energy from, which strengths you're able to use frequently or not. So for no charge, you could have every person on your team take that very same assessment that you took, and what they would receive is a 1-page summary of their top 3 realized strengths that you're using most frequently, their top 3 unrealized strengths that they get energy from and perform well, but are not using as frequently, their top 2, I think it is, draining strengths, those learned behaviors, and their top 1 weakness. And that would be a great place, perhaps, for you to start to feel like you are armed with information about each of your direct reports, as well as content for having conversations with them about their strengths.
Well, I'm very excited because it aligns with something we were just chatting about at our senior staff meeting about how we might make our kind of all staff meetings more effective, engaging, and fun. And one of the things that we talked about doing was every month doing a mini kind of skill building exercise or collaborative exercise to help us actually develop tangible and concrete skills we can use in the office to make our work more enjoyable, effective, collaborative. And so the idea of having the whole team take the free assessment and then come to one of our group conversations to share with one another what they learned, what surprised them, what really resonated, could be a really lovely way to bring this to the full organization and to also have everyone appreciate one another. Sometimes I think focusing on strengths in the way that we are today can do so much to solve conflict, because what might have been something confusing and irritating that a colleague or a fellow team member might be doing might actually be proven when you start to understand why they're approaching something in a particular way from a strength perspective. It might actually be a way for people to work more effectively together and to appreciate each other for what they're bringing to the table and how it might complement your own set of skills.
Yes. And one of the ways that I've had that type of conversation with clients over the years is to start by having people reflect on what is a strength, perhaps, that you're really good at, you're really energized by, you're able to use quite frequently in your role that maybe occasionally you overplay. So inadvertently on your part, because you mean really well, but perhaps when you overplay that strength, one of two things happens. Either you're not using your other strengths. What a missed opportunity. You've got plenty, right? We can see them right there on your list. Or secondly, as you just suggested, Sharon, you might find yourself in some kind of interpersonal conflict. So unintended on your part, but the other person might just not have as much appreciation for all the questions you're asking with that curiosity strength, or all the worrying you're doing with your prevention strength. And once you see your own overplaying possibilities, it's a little bit easier, as you just suggested there, to tolerate someone else's overplayed strength. And also, when you have a team workshop like you're describing, and people talk about that and they are vulnerable with it, and you have a strength language, then you can even use that event and the strength language.
Shared language, I think, makes such a difference in so many things. And I love that idea of kind of arming ourselves with our own self-knowledge and also our knowledge of one another.
Great. Well, I'm looking at the time here and I'm thinking we probably should wrap up. So let me just ask you this, and you're reflecting on this conversation we've had. Is there any piece of advice that you might offer to other nonprofit executive directors about leaning into their strengths, or anything from this conversation that was particularly insightful that might be useful for people who are listening to this podcast to contemplate for themselves?
I think I might encourage people to carve time out for that self-knowledge and self-care that an exercise like this can help you develop. We're all moving so fast, and there are so many pressing priorities, projects, concerns that can keep us functioning in a very reactive way, in a very responsive way. But I think the slowing down, introspection that getting to know yourself better and your strengths can offer can make everything more effective and frankly, enjoyable, right? Like, it's exciting to think about, oh, I do love planning and I do love thinking through new ideas, and that would benefit the organization. How can I do that more? Is something that I think will only serve you in the organizations that you're working with.
Brilliant. And let me make a suggestion then to you, Sharon, as sort of a way to close this out and make this a tangible next step for you. And that is, maybe take your list of strengths and put them somewhere where you can glance at them, perhaps in the morning before you start your day, to ask yourself, all right, well, what do I have on my agenda today? And as I'm thinking about the variety of meetings I'm going to be in, or conversations I'm going to have, or things I'm doing on the weekend, which strengths do I want to be thoughtful about how I'm going to use them, or be careful not to overplay them? Or what strengths do I have that I don't use very frequently in this particular scenario that I want to bring in? Because having that intentionality with a trigger like your list of strengths, or like strength cards or that kind of thing, will really help you be really reflective. Or maybe even at the end of the day, just take a minute or two and think about, well, what went really well today? And why was that? What strengths was I using? Or what did not go so well, or was frustrating or stressful for me? And where did I have to use some of my draining strengths? Because the more you pay attention to these things, your strengths use, the more automatic it will become. And then you're just kind of developing those neural pathways in your head where you don't have to really think down the road that much about your strength use, because it's more top of mind for you. Let me leave it at that. I'll let you get back to work. Thank you so much for joining me for this podcast conversation, being vulnerable and reflective and using your incubator strength in service of everybody else. And I wish you well in the very important role you're playing there. And I'm going to keep sending my friends and colleagues to the Fine Arts Work Center. It sounds like a fabulous place.
Well, thank you, Colleen. It was a great conversation today.
I hope this conversation invited you to slow down in the way that creativity often asks us to, with openness, curiosity, and a willingness to look inward. Listening to Sharon reflect on her strengths and her leadership reminds us that understanding ourselves is its own kind of creative practice. In leadership, as in arts, clarity comes from paying attention. Actually, research shows that when leaders intentionally use their strengths, they are rated up to 18 times more effective by their teams. And today's conversation certainly offered a glimpse of why. When we lead from strength, we create space for others to do the same. So if Sharon's story resonated with you, you'll find links in the show notes to learn more about the Fine Art Work Center. That, again, is a place where artists and writers explore their fullest creative potential. You'll also find a link to the strengths profile assessment, which Sharon completed, and you can get a simple report for yourself for free. And in the show notes, you'll get a link to the introspective cards, which offer simple, reflective prompts to help you stay connected to your strengths by reflecting on how you can be using them every day. So thank you for spending this time with me on the Strength Catalyst. I hope you'll join me for the next episode as we continue exploring how to maximize your strengths and power your potential in your leadership, your creativity, and your life.